Morning.
Hello. So exciting demo today. So Skarbek, over to you. No, not exciting.
I'm going to do a tour of metrics. There's an incident that was just logged because Elasticsearch apparently stopped handling or ingesting logs. And I think that was probably due to me because I'm sitting here trying to create reports for a lot of stuff, which is searching through a lot of data. I'm not going to chime in on the incident because I'm just drawing pictures, but I'll share my screen here. So what I'm trying to showcase is the overall bump in our request response duration and request queuing for both Rails as well as Workhorse. So this is looking back at Thursday, which is not the best day to look at because I can't compare it to a Thursday where Kubernetes has been running traffic because it's not yet Thursday. And it's also not great because there was some blip in our radar. So, something happened during this day. But we could see, for the most part, like our P99 is somewhere between 1 second and half a second, whereas our P95 is much better at well below half a second, probably hovering around 300 milliseconds. Kubernetes, on the other hand, this is also difficult to look at because a couple of reasons. One, it's Tuesday. Two, we were still performing some minor tweaks, and you could see that there's a definite change here where we were running fewer pods, and then we modified our HPA to ramp up more pods, so our request time or response times got slightly better. But in here, we're hovering at 800 milliseconds for our P99, and which color is it? Green. Our green line is hovering around 400 milliseconds, which is almost double what our VMs were showing. So that's Rails. For Workhorse response, which tab is it? This one. A little more spiky to look at. This is also measured in milliseconds. But like our P99 is sitting, or P95 is sitting down here right around 300 to 400 milliseconds. Kubernetes, harder to look at because we still have VMs intermingled, and then we had that Postgres flip, which kind of screwed up our chart here. But if I could pinpoint the green dot, which is somewhere inside of here, I can't get to it. Oh, I had it. Anyways, we're roughly double is what I'm trying to get to. And the same for request queuing. So our virtual machines, we're sitting at, 2/100ths of a second, and in Kubernetes, we're at 1/10 of a second. So like that's a little bit more than double, but we have seen a performance degradation with the use of Kubernetes is what I'm trying to get to. I don't think if we made any changes to our horizontal pod autoscaler, we're going to see any changes, because right now, if we look at any of our saturation metrics, we're in an okay spot. I think, and Graham also did a little bit of investigation. Maybe I should showcase what he did. It's kind of difficult for me to fully understand what he's attempting to show here because the lines, they clearly have a cliff. So this is shown before and after the migration. This is like almost an entire week, but like there's no change in response time essentially. Like you could see this gray line right here is 1 second, and like we're right below it. And then up here, you can see where it jumps up just a wee bit when we did the migration, and it kind of hovers around the same state. So we could either determine that nothing changed or that we're in an okay spot, and that what I'm trying to chase down is not really anything that's super exciting to really look at. I think what we're seeing is the fact that we have a different network architecture involved here inside of Kubernetes. And we also have some structural changes to how traffic is flowing just in general. Instead of using Unix sockets, which are super quick because you're staying on the same machine, you're using just a simple file descriptor to talk to a different process. Here, instead, your file descriptor, I don't think is the right handle. A file handle is what I wanted. Whereas right now we're spending kernel time to initiate a TCP socket to go over the network to speak to either the same pod or a differing pod for certain items. I would expect to see in. Go ahead.
I have a question to that. Because we are always comparing the P99, P95, so we are comparing the worst cases, right?
Yes.
And it would be interesting to also look at the average, maybe, because maybe there's no difference at all, and it could be that we have some effect, like we often have one single pod behaving badly, and that would lead to a huge difference for the P99. But on
So
average,
let's just change this. Like, what do you think is a good percentile that would capture? Like, P99 is going to grab as many requests as possible.
Start with 50, maybe. So we have the median.
Let's just look at 50. Trash. Update. This one. See if I could, cause another incident by simply drawing pictures on the screen. I didn't point this out, but I'm looking at a time range of 7 a.m. UTC to 8 p.m. UTC. This is just shy of what I asked Henry what like the EMEA load looks like in the morning. So this is an hour before Henry noted, and I didn't really know where to stop because APAC traffic clearly just drops off and makes it look like nothing is happening. But I chose 8 o'clock because it looked sane. So this is our P50 for virtual machines. So here you can see that we have numbers super low. That's cool. This is a really bizarre chart. It just goes up all day long and then just plummets. But we're in the thousands of a second range. I'm hoping you guys could read my screen because the font is kind of small, but this is 0.006, which looks to be like a good median throughout the entire day. Has Kubernetes finished drawing? It did. Again, we had a spike at the very end of here, so that kind of throws off the chart. But for Kubernetes, it looks like it's roughly the same. Like if anything, it's slightly better because this is 0.005, so 5 thousandths of a second. So, 50% of our requests are probably showing similar behavior and performance with our virtual machines. If we're trying to, I'm always looking at the worst case scenario because I want to make sure things are tip top shape kind of situation, but
yeah, it's an interesting one.
That's
so
interesting,
chatting to Graham this morning, and yeah, he was talking a little bit about this. He didn't show me the graphs, but he was talking a bit about this, that from a HA proxy point of view, so from the user's experience, it's basically like for like. So it's most likely that the stuff we're now seeing on Kubernetes previously used to be what Nginx did, but invisibly. So it's all just the same thing. The only thing that we do see more of, and maybe that's what is contributing to the 95th and 99 percentiles being higher, is around queuing. So I don't know if you showed that on any of those graphs just then, Skarbek, but like there are certainly times where we'll see more queuing going on than we did before. So as chat Graham back might be a useful thing for us to actually look at, like, what is the actual real impact of queuing? Like as a user, like what would that mean to me if my request queued more than normal? Or does it have an impact on resources or whatever it is? And we can see for that.
So let's look at queue duration. I don't know if we have queue count in our metrics at all. We're not going to see that inside of Kibana, but we at least have the queue duration. So how long something has sat inside of a queue waiting to be picked up. I'm not actually sure what this metric is going to look like, because we did have a massive change in how many workers we run. And then per pod we have, per pod we have a different set of workers. And then the configuration is going to be different, where each worker has a different number of threads. Like our total number of threads will be significantly different. But for virtual machines, we're sitting down here at 12/100ths of a second, and Kubernetes about the same roughly, if not slightly better as the day tails off. Whoops, crap. How do I go back to my previous time range? That one. So it stays relatively constant throughout the entire day, sitting at 11,000ths of a second for the most part. And Kubernetes is a little more bouncy at the beginning of the day because we did have issues, but it came down pretty nicely, and it's probably slightly better, if not the same. That's the P50 of the duration, at least.
This is really cool because, I mean, this shows that what you have discovered this today with the thread contention, right? That a single pod was responsible for showing us this really bad saturation, while the whole fleet was okay. But we had one single pod, and our metrics are built this way that we always show the worst. And maybe it's the same case for our P99 and P95th percentile, that we just have one single pod behaving badly, and this way we see it going up. But if you look at the median, it seems we are at least as good as before. So that's really great. Now we need to look into why why pods sometimes act up, and also I forgot what I wanted to say. Yeah, and looking at the deployment issues that we have, right? Because during deployments, we often see workers upticks drop and go up in combination with the node scaling events that we see. So there's a clear correlation. I also saw this morning during deployments, but it's the same on API. So we see the same drop on API also going down. So it's not something which is new for webs, but it's a special thing that we always have with Kubernetes, since we have API and web running there, and see problems with node scaling, right? We looked into this a lot, and I think I still don't fully understand why we drop in performance there, but there is something going on with scaling at least.
I have a theory, but I haven't made any effort to prove it just yet. Our AppDex looks at all of our requests, and there's a lot of errors that we get during a deploy. We intentionally modify our readiness check to where we set a readiness check to send 503s. That way the pod gets pulled out of rotation. But Kubernetes is constantly hitting that health check endpoint. We don't see this in virtual machines because the virtual machines get pulled out of HA proxy. So that health check endpoint doesn't ever get hit unless maybe the installation procedure does. Kubernetes, that behavior is very different. So we're going to keep seeing 503s as long as Kubernetes is going to keep trying to hit that pod until that pod gets removed from rotation. My theory is that because of that, we're also using our health controller feeding into our metrics. And if that's true, that would certainly throw an error, and that would certainly impact our AppDex.
Yeah, but our error rate didn't go up at the same time. So maybe it's getting into the AppDex, but at least for the error rate, I didn't see anything. So I thought it's really maybe a latency thing, but I don't know how they are mixed together in AppDex. So
maybe we should, well, so one, we need to prove by theory, because if errors aren't going up, maybe there's a different metric that we're using for errors. Maybe we're purposely avoiding like gateway timeouts or, server unavailable situations and only counting 500s, for example. And if that's the case, we're not going to see that increase on our charts. So I don't have an issue to track that investigation, so I should create one. But yeah, that leads into the next conversation that I wanted to have a chat about the use of Ruby thread contention. But before I do we have any further conversation that we want to discuss about what I've shown so far?
Would be interesting to see at what point you start seeing the degradation. So at 50% we don't see it, at 95% we do see it. What happens in between?
That's a good point.
Not something to do now, I guess.
Maybe I'll try to look into that, and I'll post on the issue we're using to track our migration, because that would be an interesting thing to look at. Anything else? Okay, so earlier, prior to me hopping online this morning, we had an incident that was created because our Ruby thread contention was saturated. And sure enough, if you look at the chart that we're looking at, I'll make this bigger. We're hovering around 65-ish%, and then we hopped up to 100% just sporadically at some point between 10 and 10:10 a.m. UTC. Oh, okay. However, if you look at this as an average across all of our pods, we're below 50%. And at the point where one pod was hitting 100%, our average only increased to 55%. So I don't like our use of max. And I did a further investigation. Rahab found that it was specifically cluster blue line, cluster C. And then I delved a little bit deeper and found out that it was just one particular pod, and it was actually Puma process 1 was the target for pod 5xgnc. And sure enough, that pod was seeing a ramp up of Ruby thread contention overall, but that's going to happen because this process kind of shared across that entire node. So of course, only one Puma thread was showing a lot of saturation. So I dislike the use of max as a resource for determining saturation, because we run over 100 pods. At this point, we're over 100 pods running in this environment. So just looking at one pod and saying we're fully saturating our Ruby threads doesn't make any sense. So I fired an issue. Andrew already has an idea for this. This doesn't speak English to me, so I'm not entirely sure if I could tackle this particular issue, but I think it would be wise if at some point we went through all of our saturation metrics to make sure that we're not erroneously sending off saturation alerts for something that's not taking into account the entire fleet, but whereas we're removing outliers, which may, like Henry mentioned, there's just one pod that was misbehaving for whatever reason. We shouldn't care if one process of one pod is failing. We should care if the entire infrastructure is saturated. And that instance already closed, so because that pod was recycled at some point. So I just wanted to show.
Did we have to intervene, or did it just Kubernetes recycled it? Okay, interesting. Okay.
I don't know what recycled it, but the pod eventually died.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. It's good to know. Like, this is super valuable stuff. So, but yeah, agreed. Not ideal that one pod can cause incidents, right?
I would agree. I think I misspoke when Jar first logged the incident. I thought it was caused by an alert, but it looks like it was not. So maybe we don't alert based on Ruby thread contention.
Okay. Okay. So possibly just we were looking at it because of the migration.
Yeah. So I do know that some saturation metrics we do alert the EOC on, but I want to make sure that we're not alerting the EOC for just one small snippet of our infrastructure versus the entire picture. And that's my primary goal with this issue, but yeah. So cool.
Yeah. I think it's important to just keep in mind that saturation metrics might be just a single node acting up, right? So it's sometimes misleading. So it's good if we can change this in a way, because even if it's no alert, it's still misleading, right? And you think there's some incident or something not right, but you need to know that that could be just one single thing, and it's not the average of the fleet what you are seeing there. Yeah, good finding.
I completely agree. So that completes everything I wanted to showcase. I don't really have anything else to demo. Does anyone have any questions about that stuff?
Nope, I don't think so. It all looks good.
So on to the discussion items. We completed the Kubernetes migration for the web service.
Yay.
But great news, huge milestone. It's a shame we haven't got Graham on this call, but well done everyone. That's really really awesome, and our smoothest one by far, which is like for the biggest one, awesome, and also to get rid of Nginx at the same time, like brilliant. So yeah, nice work.
I sent Graham a message saying he should grab a bottle of champagne. So as far as this migration effort goes, because we still have the Epic open and we still have a couple of final issues that we need to close up. I think the Epic. All right, can you still hear me? Okay, so for this Epic, we still have a few issues. One is tuning the actual service, because right now we're running roughly 3 times as many nodes as we really should be. So similar to what we did with the API, we just need to sit down and tune things. I think we could use the API as our baseline and tune from there. So I think at some point we just need to do the actual work to make the changes in production. It's kind of late in this week. I would like to kind of keep things stable for the rest of this week, since considering we have Family and Friends Day on Friday. So I think next week would be a good target time to touch that personally. But if Graham wants to tackle that during his time, I have no fret about it. So let's rock it out. I know we still need to go through our run books and get rid of a few things. And we also need to peel through various dashboards to make some changes so that we're not capturing metrics from our virtual machines, and then go through Chef Repo and clean a lot of things up. So we still have plenty of work left to do on this Epic, but I'm hoping within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we could easily close it out. At the same time, we also need to remove the web deployment from deployer and patcher, which is going to be even wonderful. So I can't wait for that to happen, because deployment should happen theoretically roughly 2 minutes faster based on the last time I looked at it. But that's 2 minutes, so let's rock it out.
Nice, that's awesome. We should, from the last rollback, we saw that probably shave a decent chunk of time. Off the last one we ran, it would have been about 10 minutes quicker
Okay.
if we'd have had web in Kubernetes, assuming Kubernetes deployment doesn't extend by a huge amount. But yeah, we spent about 10 minutes at the end just waiting for web. So there should be big gains there as well.
Yep.
One additional task. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The one thing I do want to make sure that we don't lose track of is that we had at one point, or we still have, the problem where if the web fleet filled up its temporary disk space with those scratch files that just never got cleaned up, we have a remediation for that in place. At some point, I want to make sure that we can remove that remediation. I don't know how to keep visibility on that, because it is one of the items where it's just a tiny little comment saying, hey, we have this because of this epic. Like nothing says, hey, this epic is closed, we can now remove this remediation.
So let me put that through the multi-large working group, because that's exactly, we have a weekly agenda. So let me, I will just keep adding that into the known blockers. Like I know, I just don't know which team, but
it's not a blocker. It's just more like I want to remove the tech debt when
no, I know it started out as a blocker though, so I know it has been scheduled. And I know the team, there's a couple of like dependencies they're working through, so I know it is on their sort of roadmap, so I'll keep it on there, because yeah, exactly, like as soon as they're done on that stuff. And the reason I say keep it on there is just we have a rolling agenda, so it's low overheads for me to just track it through there, and as soon as we're good on that one, yeah, we can schedule in the task to remove our side. Awesome. Cool. One extra thing which I think we should probably also plan to do is there's going to be a whole heap of issues that are no longer needed. Now that not only is web migrated, but we've also got rid of Nginx on web. So it might be nice for us also to just schedule in a bit of time and just try and go through some of the infra backlog and see if we can find any obvious ones that we could just close out, particularly if there's any corrective actions. I know they've got like a massive list they're trying to burn through, but I'm fairly sure some of them are lower priority now, or maybe not even needed at all.
I agree. Maybe when we get to the point where our epic can be closed, we can do that.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure those VMs are cleaned up before we start closing random issues.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, let's wait until we're properly done, and then do that stuff. Awesome.
So next up, I'm kind of leaning on Amy to drive this conversation, but I've already started working on the pages migration work. I've populated the epic. Henry, I think I've copied you on some message at some point in time to take a look at the epic and make sure it looks like it's in an okay spot. I did mangle the board that I've created so that we do have a couple of issues in the ready column. So whenever we're looking for work to do, we could start pulling from that column as necessary. There are at least 2 blocking issues in our Helm chart that prevents us from performing the migration, but that's not going to stop me from at least getting started for pre-prod.
Okay.
I did assign one of those issues to me just because it looked like it wasn't going to be terribly hard, and I thought I could knock it out, and it's a good break from kind of the work I've been doing recently anyway. So I guess outside of
on those 2 blocking issues, Skelbeck, are they do you have a rough sense of like at what point will they be blocking? Like, do they need to go into the next milestone? Like, would that be too far away? Do we need them in the next like 2 to 3 weeks?
So no, not the next. Well, I don't know how fast I'm going to move, but I don't think in the next 2 or 3 weeks we need them. But as soon as I start working on staging, I'm going to want them in place. So my goal with the way that I'm approaching this is I need to learn how Pages works. So I'm going to get this rolling in pre-prod first. And none of the blocking issues that I've seen so far prevent me from doing that in pre-prod. The blockers will come for staging because we do have a custom header in place. And right now that configuration just doesn't get taken into place at all. Logging is currently not working from my personal testing. It could just be a situation where I might not have something set up properly. So that'll be important. So when we get the staging, these will be considered blocking for me. But again, they're not going to prevent me from, at least testing the process and procedure of migrating. Again, my goal is to test this, make it work in pre-prod, and then use staging as a test bed for how to do the actual migration of the service. At the same time making sure it works, obviously. So it'll become a blocker at that point. So I'm going to guess within sometime mid-September is probably when we'll get to that point. I don't know how long it's going to take me to finish up the pre-prod stuff. I did get a response from Jamie. I forget which team he's on, but he led me to a few testable items that we should consider during this migration. So I spun up at least one new issue this morning that I'm going to work through just to make sure I'm testing everything. And then there's another clarification I need from him about one particular feature that I'm not too familiar with. So soon, but not immediate is what I'm trying to say.
Yep. Okay.
But again, one of those is assigned to me and I'm actively working on it. So
super. Okay, great. I've just added the those 2 blocking issues to the multi-large agenda for Monday to ask if we could get those scheduled in for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So
I did mark them as relatively low priority, like P3 on the Helm chart and then a P2 on the logging one.
Okay.
So we have time.
Cool. Okay, brilliant. Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, so in terms of kind of what we've got, so on a kind of what we've got going on at a team level, registry, well, we still have to wrap up web stuff, right? We know that registry is moving forward nicely, so we'll have like kind of ongoing tasks there. And we also, probably not a huge amount, but there could be a little bit of work around staging, but it's probably more like Alessio will help out on that stuff. There are other SREs assigned to that project. One thing we do have coming up, and I think it will land, it's going to kind of get started in September, but it's just a kind of investigative thing, is we're working with scalability. We have a shared OKR through Q3 with scalability to come up with an approach to migrate Redis. So what we need to do, we need to kind of understand like what are the differences between the different types of Redis. We have 4 different types of Redis cluster at the moment. So we need to really understand like what are the specific differences between those 4? Like, do we need to have support for 4, or could we somehow consolidate? And then if Kubernetes is the solution to migrate to scale, which I would think it would be, then we also need to work out how would we like move data and how would we actually operate these. So the work will begin in September. The goal for Q3 is to basically come out with a plan and work out like what would we use to operate this, which cluster would we migrate with first, and like, you know, what might actually be involved. So probably setting up some POCs and actually investigating that stuff. So we have an epic. This will most likely kick off kind of early September. We're still working out details there, but I chatted with Graham about it this morning, just as a certainly probably the most likely person to do at least the first leg of this, since registry is almost certainly going to still be going, and we've got pages in progress as well. But as we go through this project, I think, you know, we can rotate through and like work out who's most interested in various pieces. But just a heads up that Redis will also begin moving soon.
This is going to be interesting because of storage being involved. So looking forward to that one.
Is that in a, you're looking forward to watching it happen? Or
yeah, just learning how to do that and what the solution will be, because that's really interesting to me. I mean, because we don't have much with storage, and I think there are several solutions then looking into operators maybe that are there for Redis.
Exactly.
So that would be really interesting to see what we learn there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, September, October will be very much like trying to learn as much as we can. The goal, the big outcome that we'd like to have from this quarter is like, okay, this is the Redis cluster we'd want to begin with. Like, this is the rough, you know, operator if we want to use one, which we would go with, and also like identify like what would be the big charts changes that we would need for this, and then Q4 we could actually get hands on with scalability and make the move.
So I see Epic, but there's no issues associated with it.
We haven't even got that far yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so at the moment, this is literally like, this is as much as exists. And then early September, we'll like actually like kick things off and work out what issues need to happen and like what does this actually start looking like.
What's our 4th Redis cluster? I only know of 3. The cache, the persistent, and Sidekick. What's the 4th one?
I've no idea.
Okay.
I don't know very much about Redis at all.
Like the only one I could think of is that we're spinning one up for the container registry, but I haven't seen.
No, we're not actually. Not at the moment. We went a totally alternate way with that, which was really good. Maybe there were 3. I'm sure there were 4.
I enjoyed the method we just got rid of caching. That was great.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, there's multiple ones there, let's say, as a general rule. But I actually don't know any details at all. So yeah, I'm also looking forward to learning a lot about Redis in the next few months.
It'll be interesting, and that's kind of unfortunate because currently infrastructure is working on testing, upgrading those clusters like soon-ish. I think Alex started up a change request to target one of those clusters already. So
okay, it may still be needed because I mean, assuming I would assume we're going to need to migrate one by one. So there's likely at least a couple of Redis clusters that are going to be in their current state until next year. So I don't think it's super immediate stuff. Like, it's definitely a bit different from any of the others we've done. So we will need to work this out. The other one we have.
Storage is not something I've really messed around a lot with on Kubernetes, so this will definitely be interesting.
Exactly, yeah. The other one we have as well, like if, say, theoretically, we got to a stage where pages just completed and Redis didn't require like, you know, all of us to be working on that. The other one that is ready to go is Prefect. And I think it's going to be a little bit similar in that at the moment, there is nothing known to block the migration. So it'd be a case of us going in and trying to do the migration. But I feel like there's probably enough unknowns about Prefect as a service on its own that we'll likely hit some interesting stuff. So that one could be a similar one in that there might be quite a bit of upfront work for us, but then there could also be quite a big gap in the middle if we have to like wait for kind of like development support or whatever we need to actually get through to the completion. So we should like, that will fit into this roadmap at some point.
I spun up a learning issue specifically towards this. I just have yet to have time to actually work on it because I'm curious about it. Because there's going to be two aspects to this. Is one, setting up Prefect in Kubernetes, but also migrating our existing file servers behind Prefect inside of Kubernetes. Like the storage servers would stay the same probably, but at least getting Prefect going and then it handling those connections, I feel. But I don't know what any of that looks like. It's interesting to me. And I'm a little bit more nervous because I think ZJ is either in the process of leaving or has left. And
That's
I feel
a good
like
point.
he's
He
going to
leaves
have a
next
lot
week.
of domain knowledge.
That's a really good point.
So I'm kind of sad about that too.
Yeah.
But that's another like stateless service that would be a prime example of migrating over theoretically.
With another database as a backend also, which is making it also interesting. Yeah, but in the GitLab team, they have a lot of people, I think, who are very into the code there. So I think we have, besides CJ, also other people who can really help out there.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. So that's going to be the other one. Like once we complete pages, we can work out like either Redis will be in a place we want to just jump in and start work on that, or if it's not, we can take a look at Prefect.
So the one item I haven't heard you mention, Amy, is any updates to our tooling.
Oh, yes. So it's a good one. So Graham has been thinking about this stuff. So we've been talking quite a bit about us getting into the habit of having tech debt running alongside all of our work. Like we're coming out of the stage where it's like great, huge migration. And we're much more now, I think, getting into a different mode of working where we're going to have a lot of these stuff. There's still loads of stuff we can migrate. So still got GitLab, we still got HA proxy. There's lots of other pieces coming up. So what I would like us to get into the rhythm of is always having on the board probably two, but at least one tech debt item that's like a smallish, distinct piece of work that when someone either has time or if you want to pick up something slightly different, you can just go ahead and pick up. So Graham has been cutting down the issues for so Graham has been looking into this Helm Git replacement stuff, and that's going to be the most likely the most sensible first thing, because so this is kind of, you'll start to see this coming in soon. So having some of these things in place will unblock us on lots of other pieces. Graham actually had quite a long list in the APAC demo last week, so that's just below on the agenda. So there are a couple of pieces here that Graham's going to put into issues and get on the board. I think it's possible. There's certainly one I think he'll just dive in and pick up, but for any of you, like, they'll be on the board if you want to take them and start moving on this stuff. They are going to be written up as issues and as anything else. Having this stuff in place will mean we can upgrade Helm and actually like start moving on some of the other pieces. sort of related, but slightly separate as well. Graham's also looking at what might be a good path to like auto deployed chart bumps. So we try and start having like manual one once a week and see how that goes, whether there's extra tooling needed. But actually maybe the goal is that it ends up either maybe in the auto deploys or some frequency that's equivalent, so that we're not just always kind of behind on chart bumps.
I guess I have two questions. Right now, we're still using the home-built tooling that Jarv and I first worked on when we created this repository, a suite of shell scripts. Our Tanker repository and our GitLab Helm files repository, and this one for that matter, they all operate slightly differently across the board. Is there any push or desire to try to unify how we are deploying to Kubernetes across all of these repos?
So we certainly can. There is Graham has two issues already on the board that the P4s. I don't have the board link. One. Sorry, just 1 second.
I guess why you pull that up. The reason why I ask is because now that more stuff is being pushed into Kubernetes, we're going to have more people contributing to those repositories. And if each one of these has their own learning curve in order to manage
tough, right?
a configuration, that's going to be really cumbersome for people.
Mm-hmm.
I already struggle with looking at the Tanker repository, so even I have some learning to do in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let me just, so the two that I know of, there is migrating the Fluid-D to Tanker deployments, and the Plantoml, is that how you say it? It's a Tanker
Plant
deployment.
UML.
Okay, yeah, there's some like capitalization missing on that word. So those are the two that we have on there already. Now, definitely, so what I was, and I think those are the only two tech day ones we really, or like tooling improvements. So what I would suggest for all of you is there are two routes really for us, this tech debt stuff to be like super well serviced. One, I know Graham and Alessio were talking about already a little bit this morning, which is ideas for how we can actually bring in the k8s workflow so it sits more comfortably alongside auto deployments and they maybe don't block each other quite so much. I haven't seen the output of that, but I know they were chatting about it. So I expect some issues and things will come from that. That's very much linked to our OKRs, because I could imagine a scenario where rollbacks could be blocked because we're pushing out a k8s workload, for example.
That happens quite often.
Yeah,
sometimes
right. Sometimes
by accident, but it does happen.
Yeah. So, those things are definitely linked. So I know that Alessio is trying to think through that stuff and has been talking with people. The other one is as someone who works on this stuff here, I can see some improvements. Now, how do we surface these tech debts into our workflow? It's not reserved for Graham. So at the moment, he's kind of pushing ahead on some of these things. But I would suggest for any of you, like, get these things cut down into, like, if they're like smallish tasks that we can complete a piece of in a few days, then it's just simply a matter of us deciding like which ones do we want to do. The moment, I don't think we have any super clear cut tech debt issues, but correct me if I'm wrong on that, but they're all kind of semi-larger projects. Like we would want to change the entire repo to do this stuff. Those are a little harder to schedule because we need to like pause on a migration to get to those things. But if we can get all of this stuff down into like, okay, we just need to change that piece, we do this piece, and we're working towards something better, that's really easy. We can just put them on the board and fit them in around other stuff.
I would encourage us to try to figure out how we could take those larger pieces of work and try to bump them ahead in our schedule, because the more stuff we put into Kubernetes, the harder that's going to become to swap over. Yep.
So at the moment, I'm going on the assumption that they can be cut down into issues. If we have pieces of that's not possible, then let's definitely like work out how that fits together.
And the second question I had was, soon, I think Pages is the last front end piece, which means therefore when for deployer, we do GitLab, Prefect, and then we do our fleets. Kubernetes is just that one stage in the future because Pages will eventually go away. Those virtual machines will go away. Is there any desire to try to figure out a different way to do deployments where instead of, I guess we have to keep Ansible in place because we have GitLab and Prefect, but for other things like our pre-deployed migrations, use the deploy node. We could instead use the task runner, which is soon to be renamed inside of our Helm chart to perform that style of work. I wonder if we should consider that kind of stuff so we could remove a few extra virtual machines, and then we're maybe simplifying how deployer looks in general and simplifying our Ansible code potentially as well.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. Yeah.
Don't we still have the patcher also running on the deploy node, or where's it running? Because I think this is the other piece that maybe also needs to be still around or be moved to some equivalent place. I'm not sure about it, but if we need to do this hot patching thing, I think it was running on the deploy node, but need to check for that. But anyway, there should be solutions to that maybe also.
Yeah, yes, definitely we should question all of these things for sure. Marion mentioned in Slack the other month that maybe it's actually k8s workloads that is the thing instead of deployer, and it just calls out to deployer if we happen to have a GitLab update, for example. So we've got lots of, once we get through Pages, we got lots and lots of other improvements we could make.
Do we already have some sort of issue or epic that is tracking that desire, or is that just kind of a thought that everyone has in the back of their mind?
I think there are maybe random things, but there's nothing cohesive. There is no like vision of like of stuff. No. So I think it's kind of in people's minds, but it's not been properly thought through yet.
Okay, well, personally, I think after Pages is done, since Kubernetes is that one stage, then maybe I'll revisit at that moment in time, creating the necessary epic to figure out what we could do then, unless something happens beforehand.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. I'm hoping by then as well that a lot of the things that we need to do for supporting rollbacks and also a lot of the stuff coming for the staging stuff might be in place as well, because I think having the answers to those things will really feed into this. Like I think we're at the point after Pages where we could make like a whole new version of the pipeline, which is like Kubernetes first, right? So like maybe that's like if we can see good gains for that, then that might be a good thing for like a Q4 kind of type of project.
Cool. Okay.
Super.
Well, that's all I have to discuss.
Nice. Is there anything else anyone wants to go through? Nope. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for the demos, Gabek, and well done, everyone. Like, huge milestone. On to Pages.
Let's rock it out.
Yeah, it's been great. Awesome. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Speak to you soon.
Great vacation. Bye-bye.
Thanks.